Hey guys, sorry about the technical difficulties on the call again. I promise that I'll be able to record next call. Just had to give these first two a couple of tries. Um, so yeah, this lesson is really about like your introduction to Traktor. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to mostly look at Traktor in this class. Yeah, so when you first look at Traktor, it can look a little bit intimidating, but there's a rule that I like to say, which is you only need to know 20% of the software to do 80% of the things. So I'm really not going to show you every single button over here. In fact, I don't really know what every single button does, but I know what most of them do, and that's all you need to know to make a basic transition and therefore a basic mix. So that's what we're going to go through. Before you even start with like dragging songs in and playing around, etc., I'm just going to run you through some settings that matter. So if I have a look on the left of my screen, it's because I'm looking at my phone that has notes, and those are the exact same notes that you have in the doc that you can refer to, and you can like look through each of these and set each one of them up. Really important to do this so that you set yourself up and you set up the software in a way that you can, you can do what you want it to do. And I'll also explain what each one does. So firstly, to go to settings, you can go Traktor preferences, or the shortcut that I think it's good for you to get familiar with is Command comma on a Mac. Don't know what it is on a Windows, but it shouldn't be too different. And it should say over here what it is. Now there's a lot of settings. And as I said, 20% of the software to do 80% of the things. So I'm not going to run you through each and every one, but some that really matter. So the first one is audio device. So under audio setup, audio device. So right now mine is set to Zoom audio device because I'm screen sharing via Zoom. But normally if you plug in headphones, external headphones should come up. If you're just going through your computer speakers, not as recommended. It'll just say the name of your computer sound card. Or if you have an external sound card plugged in, you can, go through there. But I'm guessing right now you just have headphones. So just plug in your headphones. That's what I recommend. And then go external headphones. Cool. So that's audio device. And then we're going to skip all the way through to loading because, as I said, you only need to know some of these settings. Now, loading really is your personal preferences. And I think this is a good one to come back to after you've done some mixes and you might, have some personal preferences here that you like. For example, I like this one, loading only into stop deck. I like to have that on. So if it's lit up, it's on. So what that means is if a track's playing and you drag another one into it, it won't stop the track. It'll go, hang on, are you sure you want to load another track into this track? This track is playing right now. So it'll only then load it into, if you stop the track, it'll load it in. So it's like a safety feature. It's a small one. Transport. This is a really important preference pane. Okay. So what I like to do is I like to set my tempo range to 16%. And you can choose whatever tempo range you like. But what this means, I'll just tell you what the important ones are, is let's say I take any track. This is the BPM or the beats per minute, the speed of the track. How many beats are there in a minute? Over here, 122 is the original BPM. And then I can actually change the BPM over here, which I'll show you in a second. But tempo range is talking about what is the range of the percentage change that you want to be able to affect that track with. So as you can see, now I'm going minus 16% and plus 16%. Okay. But if in that tempo range, I change it to 100%, it basically makes that range a lot more sensitive. So, 100% is like a bit extreme. It's not even playing, it's so slow. 3%, or like 200. So anyway, why is that important? Like it's important to know like different genres are at different BPMs, and I've put this in the note. So like hip hop is at about 80 to 100 BPM. House, you can say, is anything from 115 to 130, and then trance is 130 plus. Psy trance is like 140 plus. Then drum and bass is like 160 to 180, which is also the same as 80, which we'll get to in a sec at the end of this video. Anyway, set the tempo range to 16%. Okay. And yeah, if you're mixing multiple genres, you might want to mix that higher because then you can take it down to a hip hop range or take it up to a psy trance range or whatever. If you're just mixing house and deep housey music, this is plenty. Mouse control, vinyl and snap. This is a really important feature, and actually one that in a later class I'll show you why one is better than the other for different things. Personally, I prefer Snap. The default is vinyl. So this is what it's talking about. If you're playing a track, let me put that back to normal. You can click and hold to pause it. So it's like you put your hand on the platter, like a vinyl platter, and then you can, take it back and take it forward. So it's emulating what vinyl used to be like, and therefore what the Pioneer CDJs and stuff are generally based off on, if they're on vinyl mode as well. But what I really like about Snap mode, especially if you're just computer DJing, is this feature. You can actually look ahead in the waveform. You see that little sign that says beats plus 8? I can just fast forward 8 beats. So listen how smooth it sounds on Traktor if I skip 8 beats. I'm just fast forwarding through the track, but it sounds really smooth because Traktor will quantize it. But what that means is it keeps it on the grid. So I'm not really losing the beat. It's always like on the beat because it's all synced up. We'll get more into how that works in the next class, like beat grids and stuff. But that's why I like Snap, because I can like just quickly move forward in a track. What else? Decks layout. Okay, cool. So this is a feature that I actually wrote into Traktor about as a kid, just because I love the idea that waves can be parallel. So right now these decks are next to each other. The waves aren't parallel. I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. But if you just go to deck layout and you change size A and B to parallel full, the best thing ever happens. Now, if I have 2 tracks, let me find another track with this. So yeah, whatever. I'm just gonna pick anything. So now I can play the second track and actually see it come in, which is something that wasn't there in previous versions. So that's really, really cool. It's one that I like, but it's up to your preference. Like Gwilym, I think he said on another call that he prefers the advanced like side-by-side mode. So totally up to you. I love parallel, so I'm going to leave it like that. This is also where you can choose to have 4 decks, which can be pretty hardcore and a little bit intimidating. So right now we're just going to do 2, but it's something you can build up to. And then you can use the 3rd or 4th deck either as decks where you're just jamming. I'll play this song, then I'll play this song, then I'll play this song. Or you can use them as sample decks where you have 2 tracks playing or transitioning, and you have a 3rd track where you just have a vocal, or a 4th deck where you just have a hi-hat and you're just using them for like those little samples. So that can be fun. Anyway, right now 2 decks and parallel full is what I prefer and what I think you should try as well. Especially if you came from virtual DJ. Virtual DJ is naturally parallel. So this feels like a nice segue from that. And then we're going to skip all the way down to effects. Effects are really fun in Traktor. So by default, it's 2 FX units. I think that's fine. And this is one thing that's really important. So if it's set to send, I'll show you what I mean. So firstly, the effects are on the top left and the top right. And right now, if I choose the send effects, I'm going to add reverb to this. I'm going to show you what it sounds like. That's weird. Sorry, I don't mean send, I mean insert. If it's insert, which is what it is by default, this is what it sounds like. Cool, so I'm going to put on the reverb so you can hear it. But if I was to take the volume fader down, it stops the track and stops the reverb as well. What I prefer, and I think is a really cool function that Traktor has, is the ability to go post fader. So now instead of the track going like, track to the effect back into the track, it's going track to the effect, and then effect is going directly out to the master. So what that means is if I have a reverb, I can do this. I put the reverb on, you can hear it. Can you hear that tail, the reverb tail? So that's because it's going straight out to the master and not back into this volume fader. So it seems a little bit subtle, but it's a really, really cool ability that it's able to do that, because you can then have a reverb tail and have something else come out of the second track, like a filter open up or whatever you like. So that's really cool. Also, you can choose effects as group or single. So as you can see, my FX1 is group and FX2 is single. Personally, I like to have these three: reverb, delay, and gator. And over here, I like to have an experimental effect beat masher, um, which we'll play around with later. But yeah, that's a little bit about the effects area and how you want it to be set up. So just basically mimic these. Post fader, two effects units, group and single is a good starting point. File management, so sounds boring, but can be quite important. Up to you whether you wanted to set analyze new imported tracks. I think that's handy because then as soon as you drag it in, it just gets analyzed, and then analyze new tracks when loading into deck. So this one over here. So as soon as you pull a track into a deck, if for some reason it wasn't analyzed, it just gets analyzed before it plays it. And the analysis is, it setting the grid and understanding the BPM of the track and allowing it to sync. We'll dive deeper into that in the next class, but that's all you need to know for now. So you can just set up your settings like that. Other than that, there's two settings on the actual main control over here that are super important: snap and quantize. And they both do slightly different things. So snap drops cues right on the grid. So as you can see, Traktor has put this grid behind the track, right? And now, if I drop a cue there, it's basically a cool feature that I can always click that beat, always click that cue, and always go back to that exact point. But the cool thing is if I zoom in, Traktor has dropped the two at the exact start of the beat. That's because snap is on. If snap is off and I do the same thing, and I just use my human timing, because I'm human, to try and do the same thing, I was a little bit late. So the beat falls at that white grid marker, but I I clicked two a little bit late. So snap is really cool because it always snaps it to grid. So I'm going to turn snap on. You generally want snap on all of the time. Little exception to that rule, um, which is to do with the vinyl and snap over here as well. We'll dive into that later. But for now, generally you want snap on all of the time. Okay. And same with quantize. So while snap drops a cue perfectly, quantize will go back to that cue perfectly. So if I didn't have quantize on, and I want to try and go back to two, I find the end of a, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go back. 3, 4. See how it sounded a bit early? And then it sounded a bit late. But if I have quantize on, it always will drop it on the beat, and therefore never lose sync, which is really important. 3, 4. 3, 4. It just sounds seamless. So Traktor's really good at that. Cool. Other things, shortcuts. Traktor does have some keyboard shortcuts. They're not all that user friendly. It's better to just get a mix, like a controller, like a Traktor Control S2 or an S4, which we'll talk about like more at the end of the class. But for now, a handy shortcut is spacebar. It brings up the library, so you can pull up your tracks, kind of preview what track you want to bring up next, drop it into a deck by just drag and drop, and then click spacebar again to collapse it. Other things, if you ever, these are all parameters, right? All these knobs and faders and sliders, let's call them parameters. So if you ever like change a parameter from its default setting of 0 or full or whatever it is, and you double click it, it just snaps back into place. So I find that really, really handy. Let's say because you finish a transition and the deck looks like this because you've done all of these like things, and then to reset it, you just double click every single thing, and it just goes back to its default setting, which is pretty cool. And if sometimes you find that you've lost your deck because it looks like this, and you're like, where's the move, cue, and grid? I've lost them. You can either click that arrow button, which I've only just seen, or if you double click on the track header, you can cycle between the different views. So if you ever feel like you accidentally clicked it and it went away, that's how you do it. And then now we're just going to quickly zone into the deck, the mixer, the effects, and then I'm going to show you some transitions which helps you put it all together. But yeah, really the point of this is so that you learn all the elements of the program so you can just have fun and mess around and understand like the boundaries of the software and what's possible. Cool. So let's go ahead and zoom into the deck. So to play a track in a deck, you drag and drop and you press play, pause, play again. Pretty straightforward. You can also zoom in over here on the top right or zoom out, which is really handy, especially when you have the parallel waveform set up. You can also use the cursor to fast forward. When it's playing, you can even see how many beats you're skipping forward, 8 or go back 16, etc. So that's super helpful. And then sync. As I said, just when you play a track, you can't change the BPM because it's not the master. You have to click it, make it the master. Then you can speed it up or slow it down. And if the other track is synced, that pitch shifter will move in time as well. Otherwise, you can set the master as like this top part over here and then change the BPM like that. But to me, it seems most intuitive just to have it over there. Cool. Then the pitch shifter. So that's this part over here. It speeds up the track, slows the track as I showed you. But one part that's attached to it is the key lock. So Traktor in default comes like this. And then, yeah, as you just heard, the pitch shifts down or up with it. So click it and the pitch will actually lock into place, which is super handy. And then let's go through this part. So move, cue, and grid. What does that actually do? So let's start with grid, but to show you the grid, I just have to show you cue, because number one here, that's a cue called a grid, and that is the part that you can dive deeper into in the grid section over here. So all that means is that this first beat is holding the grid together. The grid in full form, it's the beat grid, is the grid at which the beats lie, which Traktor is syncing track A with track B. So it analyzes the track, it places an imaginary grid behind it. This grid doesn't actually exist per se. It's like reverse engineering what the grid was when the producer made it. And this allows us to like sync up different tracks together. So you can see like the beats of track A line up exactly with the beats of track B because it's synced. And we'll dive deeper into how sync works in the next lesson. But for now, all you got to know is Traktor will automatically place number one will always be white because it's the grid. The grid is this big number is like what BPM is the track, right? And it usually gets it right 99% of the time. The only thing to know for now about the grid, and this will come in handy in the last part when I show you the transitions, is that the BPM can be halved, so 56, or doubled. That doesn't mean you're doubling how fast the track is playing. You're just counting it in double time or counting it in half time. Why would you want to do that? We'll show you later. It comes especially in handy for hip hop, drum and bass kind of transitions. Cool? Sweet. The other things are, yeah, of course. So cue, diving in here. Cue is super simple and honestly one of my favorite parts of the software. It's as simple as you like a part, you can drop a cue, and you want to go back to that part, you click the cue as much as you like. Cool. So why is that handy? How can you use it strategically? We'll dive into all that in the next lesson. For now, I just want to tell you that that functionality is possible and for you to explore how would you use that creatively. Cue, that's good to know. As you can see, there's many types, but there's only 3 that matter for now. Cue, grid, and loop. So loop is the third one, right? So before I show you that, let me just show you the looper, which is this part of your software. And this allows you to loop any part of the track. Cool, so that's an 8-bar loop. Bring it down to 4, 2, 1. How small can it go? I don't know. It's one of the things I want you to explore, like the boundaries of the software. But yeah, to actually place a looping cue, so a cue that loops from that point, just set a loop and then click that cue. Simple. So now what does that do? Anytime you get to that part of the track, it'll automatically loop. Cool, right? And you can deactivate it by just clicking active, it won't loop again. So that's really handy if there's like a track with a short outro and you want to automatically loop that outro so that you're not caught out, that you get to the outro and it just ends and you have an awkward moment where you haven't actually put in the second track properly just yet. So looping cues can be really handy. And to delete a cue, just click that cue and click the trash icon. Cool? All right, so that's the deck. Let's move into the mixer. Again, low, mid, high, we went through this last time. What does that do? Instead of you turning the volume down or up, which turns all of the frequencies down or up in equal proportion, you can choose to only turn down or up the low frequencies or the mids or the highs. Okay, the mids, that's really like the soul or the heart of the track. And then the highs, I would say that's like the life of the track. The crispy hi-hats, you know, make you feel like you're there. But yeah, if you turn them down, they sound muffled. And now we get to the filter, which is a really interesting and one of my favorite parts of the software. So why is there a filter? In the old softwares, there weren't a filter. Let's say you want to create an effect where a sound is coming out of a box, or like a nightclub door opens and the sound comes out. You know, low frequencies travel the longest, so it'll probably sound something like this. Then a bit of high, then a bit of mid, and then a bit of high. Okay, but that wasn't the smoothest thing, and that's pretty tedious. What if we use a filter to do the same thing? You just sense how clean that is? And what about the other way? Only high frequencies first, two low frequencies. Cool. So that is a really important concept. I know it seems super simple, but let's just quickly have a look at like what that looks like. So this is a track that I showed you in the first lesson. So if I was to do the same thing, low pass filter, now you can see what's happening with this spectrum on the right. So when it's low, you're only allowing the low frequencies, right? What that also means is you have space in the high frequencies. That's a opportunity. You have space to bring in something else, a new element. And same with the high pass filter. It's just that it's starting high and then coming in low. And if you look at it right now, the high pass filter that's not closed all the way is the same as just cutting the lows. It's just no kick drum, right? So you'll see me do some transitions in the end where I use the filter a little bit. And now when I use the filter, like at least like you'll know what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. I'm basically making space in the song to allow the other song to come in. That's the easiest way to put it, I think. Cool. So that's a low pass filter or a high pass filter. Cool. And also Likith asked a good question. About like filters and effects. So you can actually, when you're playing around with the effects, there's some really fun effects that have filters to do with them. So now when you play with that, you at least know like what's the concept behind a filter. Cool. The rest of the mix is pretty simple, guys. So we'll just push ahead. Like it's basically how loud do you want it and how much of track A or track B. Usually for deep house and disco kind of music, like it's just in the middle. For hip hop, you don't have as much time, so you use the crossfader. And I'll show you a transition in the end where I use the crossfader so you understand how it comes into play. Also for now, don't worry about the key, don't worry about the gain, all right? We'll maybe talk about gain in the last maybe class, but we don't really need to go into it now. And then the last part is effects. So put simply, if you want deck A to be affected by effects 1 on the top left, just click 1 over here. If you click 2, it's going to be affected by effect 2 on the top right. And you can set any effects you want. I've gone with the most boring ones. I love these ones. They're very standard, but choose your own, like go nuts, have fun. So reverb, delay, so always quantized, always in sync, see? And then gator. Cool. So have fun, just have fun with effects. There's so many to go from. And then there's also a single effect where you can choose one of those many effects. And there's 3 extra parameters. They do some wild shit, like beat mash is just crazy. So let's have a look. I don't even. So half the time, guys, I don't even know what I'm doing with like beat masher. It's just fun to play around with. So have a go on that. Okay, cool. So now that I've shown you a bit of that, let me show you like 3 example transitions, and I'll also like talk you through what I'm thinking while I'm doing it. So Okay, so track A is playing. I'll line up track B. I wanted to come in slowly, so I kill the lows and bring the volume down. Hit play at the right time. I can hear the highs slowly starting to creep in. And then I can see that the lows from track A are going to come to an end, so maybe I start bringing this one in. But I still want to keep track A going, so I'll loop it. Cool. It's doing its thing. It's fun. I cut the lows there because the lows from the second track really came in. The kick drum came in, so I cut the lows there. Then filter it up to make sure it's just like the highs. Now track A has to end at some point. I might as well end it now with this significant change coming up in track B. See? And I added a bit of reverb there to give it a bit of tail. So super simple transition there. It was just like any generic real deep housey kind of transition. At its core, what I just did is I lined both tracks at the right time and I hit play. I then just added a bit of the EQ, the filter, the effect at the end to show you how they can help guide the transition. It would have still sounded good without doing those things. That just adds that extra layer of finesse. All right, let's go through another example. So let's go through hip hop. Totally different genre. Now the first thing you'll notice is that it's playing 16% faster than it should. So remember, when you start, to double click the pitch shifter, reset your parameters. Like effects was on, put the effects off, right? So now it's playing at 96. Cool. And let's just listen to what the track sounds like. It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine, Salt and Pepper and Heavy. Cool. It's Biggie doing his thing on the streets. And then we got track B over here. Okay, cool. So one thing to note is you probably want to find a point in one of the either song to transition where it's not two people rapping at each other with guitars and bass lines and kick drums all at the same time. That's going to sound really busy. So maybe find a part of the track in track A where there's not as much going on. So let's have a listen to the outro. Nice. Just kick in bass line, right? There's a bit more space. So maybe that's what we use as the point at which we transition in the second song. So now let's say I'm playing the first song, and now you're going to see I'm using the crossfader because I don't have as much time. Look at how much time I have between now and there, right? So I need to use the crossfader because it's a bit more nimble rather than like EQs and little adjustments when I have time. And then it's easy to also flick back. Cool. So yeah, not like the best transition in the world, but it generally works and you get the point. Like hip hop's quicker. You can use the crossfader to mix between 1 and 2, find the right part of the song. But at the end of the day, it's still just counting. Like 4 is the outro. You know, like if you went 32 back, there's a significant point there. You can see a significant change. So those rules still stay the same. All right. Now I'll show you one last transition, and this is to help you with multi-genre. So let's say you want to go from hip hop to playing like drum and bass, right? So Arushka's been DJing at a party. Again, double click to reset the pitch to normal, and she's been playing some like chill hip hop throwback tunes, but she secretly really wants to play drum and bass, and so she has to like transition to drum and bass. So this track's at 80, drum and bass is at 160. How is she going to transition? So this is where you can use like a song that helps you transition, and a trick with the BPM, which we spoke about earlier a little bit. So this track's at 84. this track, Holding On by Flume, is at 180. How is that going to work? Let's have a look. Cool. Tupac's doing his thing on the left at about 80 BPM. So now on the right, what I do is I sync this track, but it's like, that's not gonna sync. It's, it's 50% slowed down to get to 84. That's just not gonna work. It's gonna sound terrible. If you want to hear how it sounds. Like, pretty cool sound design and stuff, but like not cool music to dance to. So you can go grid, and then I'm gonna go half it by 2. So look at what it's done. It's not playing the song at half the speed. It's just counting it at half the time. And suddenly it's at 90 BPM because 180 divided by 2. And now Ghetto Gospel is way more reachable. It's only like 6% slower. So I'm gonna fast forward to the outro. I'm gonna cut the low, cut the mid so that actually, another way you can do it is just filter it up. That's the same as cutting the low and cutting the mid. So you can just hear the vocal more. And then slowly start to speed it up to Holding On's original BPM, which is 90. Alright. Cool. And now Arushka's playing Holding On. So now she wants to play her next tune, which is like, let's say a drum and bass song at 174. And she's at 90. No problem. Just times it by 2. You're back at 180, right? So now you can easily play a drum and bass song, which is at 174. Let's have a listen. Just gonna buy some time, sorry. Alright. I'm gonna cut the bass from this second song. Holding On. Just to make it like something's about to happen. And now you're on like drum and bass land, right? You're like in a totally different world. You can take this wherever you like. Obviously this track was pretty deep actually. Arushka, good find. Oof. Anyway, so yeah, I hope that was helpful. This last part, this transitions, is just to show you how it can all come together. But I really want you all to not worry about any rules. The only rule you know about is music goes in patterns of 4, multiples of that, so 8, 16, 32. But really now you just know how software works. Download songs you love, chuck them in, loop them like hard, 1/4, 1/8. Filter them after you've looped them, add reverb after you've filtered them. Oh my god, you can do so much. So just have a bunch of fun, and then in the next class we'll talk about beat matching and harmonic mixing and what makes a good transition, and that's gonna be fun.